Kang Min-jun left a $1 tip on a $3,000 bill and expected the waitress to cry. She did not cry. She followed him into the rain, slid the bill back into his coat pocket, and told him in perfect Korean that anyone poor enough to leave a single dollar on a table like his was suffering from something no amount of money could ever repair. Then she bowed, turned on her low black heels, and walked back into the restaurant she had no idea he owned. The most feared man in Seoul stood on the wet sidewalk of Cheongdam-dong at 11:47 on a Tuesday night with a folded dollar bill against his ribs, and no idea that the woman who had just refused him had, without knowing it, changed the direction of his life. The city breathed around him, cedar smoke drifting from a whiskey bar next door, the metallic tang of wet asphalt, the low pulse of bass from a rooftop lounge 3 floors up. His driver, Kwon Sang-woo, stood by the black Maybach with one hand on the door. Rain beaded on the polished paintwork and slid down like mercury. Min-jun did not move. His fingers curled once around the folded bill in his pocket and stayed there. Before this story pulls you deeper into a world where one wrong word can bury a man and one soft act can rewrite an empire, smash that like button and subscribe right now, because what happens over the next 30 minutes will hollow you out and put you back together. Now, let it begin. 6 hours earlier, Amara Johnson had been on the 18th floor of the Han Sky Tower, standing in the service corridor of Restaurant Sebuke in a fitted black dress and low pumps, tying an apron behind her back with the practiced calm of a woman who had learned to bury exhaustion behind good posture. She was 26 years old, 5'8", with the kind of curves South African aunties still described as proper, and skin the color of polished acacia wood. Her hair was braided into a low knot at the nape of her neck. Her lipstick was the exact plum shade her mother had worn to Sunday services in Johannesburg 12 years ago on the last morning of her mother's life. She checked her small silver watch, 5:47 p.m., and glanced at the seating chart. Table 9, corner window, reserved under the name Park Do-hyun, solo guest. Special dietary notes, none. She did not know that the reservation was false. She did not know that the man who would occupy Table 9 had used the name Park Do-hyun exactly 41 times over the last 3 years, always in situations where he did not wish to be Kang Min-jun. She only knew that Table 9 had asked for their window view seat and had tipped the concierge 400,000 won to make sure the light hit the glass at sunset. She had smiled at Harin, the concierge, and gone to fold the napkins herself. At 6:12, Kang Min-jun walked into the restaurant. He was dressed in a charcoal suit that had been cut in Milan for a man who did not exist on any Korean identification card. His watch was steel. His shoes were unbranded. His hair was longer than his usual precision cut, brushed forward, obscuring the small scar above his left eyebrow. He had entered the hotel through the parking level, taken the executive elevator, and had not spoken to a single employee. Even the maitre d', who had served the Kang family for 11 years, did not recognize him. That was the point. Amara greeted him at Table 9. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Sebiuk. May I bring you something to drink?" Her Korean was low, careful, and unaccented. He noted it. He had expected a stumble. He did not receive one. He did not smile. "Water, no ice, and bring me the wine list. Not the recommendation list, the full one." "Of course, sir." She turned. She moved through the room the way people who had grown up around water moved. No wasted motion, no hurry. He watched her cross the floor and did not know yet that he was going to spend the next 4 hours attempting to break her. He had a reason for the game. He had a reason for all of his games. 5 years ago, in a warehouse outside Pyeongtaek, his younger brother Kang Do-hyun had died in his arms. The bullet had entered under Do-hyun's collarbone and lodged near his spine. The blood had soaked through Min-jun's shirt while he counted his brother's breaths and lied about the ambulance. The information that had led the assassins there had been sold 3 days earlier by a woman named Yoon Se-ra, who had at the time been wearing an engagement ring Min-jun had given her in Paris the previous spring. Since then, Kang Min-jun had believed exactly one sentence about the human species. Everyone was for sale. He had, over 5 years, tested this sentence on more than 100 strangers in more than a dozen countries. Nobody had ever failed the test. Amara returned with the wine list. She set it on the table with the small silver pen. She did not linger. She did not smile too widely. She did not, he noticed with a small flicker of irritation, look at him for a second longer than the interaction required. He ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2005. He watched her nod, note nothing on paper, and walk away. He waited. She returned with the bottle. She presented the label. He waved his hand. She began to pour. When the glass was 1/3 full, he lifted his hand and said, "No, I have changed my mind. Bring me the 2010 instead." She did not react. "Of course, sir." She took the bottle back. She returned with the 2010. She poured. He waited until the glass was 1/4 full. He lifted his hand again. "No, the 2015. The maitre d' at the far end of the room glanced over. Amara did not turn her head. She simply inclined it, said, "Yes, sir," and left. He did this 4 more times. Each time she returned. Each time she poured. Each time she was calm. On the 5th bottle, when he reached forward to lift his glass, he let his fingers brush against the base of it, and the entire glass tipped over onto the white linen. Deep red wine bloomed across the cloth like a shot. "You knocked it," he said before she could speak. "Careless." The maitre d' began to move. Amara raised one hand, a small, quiet gesture that told him to hold. He held. "I apologize, sir," she said. She did not look at the stain. She looked at him. She looked at him the way a good nurse looked at a patient who had thrown his tray. "I will replace the glass and the cloth immediately." She did. She did not comment. She did not glare. She did not, when she leaned across the table to lift the ruined linen, allow her hand to tremble once. He tried 3 more approaches over the next 2 hours. He complained that the beef was underdone. Then, when she brought a new plate, that it was overdone. He asked for the chef to come out and apologize in person, and when the chef arrived, a nervous man named Bae, Minjun dismissed him with a single wave before he could speak. He ordered a dessert not on the menu. When she offered a substitution, he said, "I have eaten dessert in Paris this year. I have eaten it in Tokyo. I have eaten it in Copenhagen. It is not a difficult concept. Perhaps in your country the standards are different." The room did not go quiet, because the room was not close enough to hear. But at the table nearest to his, an old Korean businessman lowered his soup spoon and glanced up at his wife with an expression that had, in it, the faintest tightening of contempt. Not for Amara, for the man across from her. She said, "My country's standards, sir, are actually very close to yours, but I understand. Would you prefer the millefeuille or the yuzu tart? Bring both, I will decide." "Of course." At table 6, a small girl of about 7 years old, a birthday celebration, a family of 4, a chocolate cake with a candle, reached too eagerly for her plate and tipped the entire cake onto the carpet. The child burst into tears, the specific gut-punch wail of a child who had been anticipating something for a week. The mother began apologizing. The father began scolding. Amara set down the millefeuille she was carrying to Minjun's table on the pass counter, walked directly to table 6, crouched to the child's level in her fitted black dress, and said in Korean, "Sweet girl, cakes are shy sometimes. They jump when they meet new people. Will you help me find another one from the kitchen?" The child stopped crying. Amara took her by the hand. She led her, at the pace of a 7-year-old, to the pass window, where she quietly asked the pastry chef to plate a fresh miniature version of the birthday dessert from the reserve. She let the child carry the small plate herself, both hands under it, tongue held between her teeth in concentration. The child returned to her family beaming. The mother wiped her eyes. Kang Min-jun watched all of this from table 9. He did not know why his throat tightened once, briefly, before it eased again. 2 tables over from the birthday, an elderly couple, the woman in a plum-colored hanbok jacket, the man leaning on a lacquered cane, was quietly struggling. The card reader at their table was blinking red. The husband was reaching for his wallet with a hand that shook slightly. The wife was looking down at her lap. Amara stopped by on her way past. She spoke to the maitre d' in a low voice. The maitre d' nodded. The card reader was quietly taken away. The elderly couple received their check, marked paid with our compliments, and did not know that a young woman who could not spend more than 300,000 won on herself in a month had, in the last 4 seconds, absorbed the cost of 2 desserts from her own wages. The maitre d' would learn this later that night. He would not tell Amara he had seen. He would only, at the end of her shift, quietly hand her an extra envelope from the front-of-house pool, and she would refuse it politely and place it in the tip jar for the busboys. Kang Min-jun saw the envelope exchange from the corner of his eye. He did not know what it meant. He filed it. He filed everything. At 10:40, he asked for the bill. It came to 3,142,001. Amara set the folder on the table with a small silver pen. She did not linger. He took his time. He signed slowly. He pressed his thumb against the tip line and considered the amount he had prepared to write. He wrote in careful hand the number 1,000, 1,001, not 1,000 American dollars, not 1,000 of anything meaningful, roughly 75 American cents. He closed the folder. He set it on the edge of the table. He rose. He put on his coat. He walked out. He heard the small, polite bow behind him. He did not turn around. He walked through the marble lobby. He rode the elevator down. He stepped out into the drizzle on Cheongdam-dong. Sang-woo saw him and moved to open the car door. Then a voice behind him, soft and unhurried, said, in English, "Sir, one moment, please." He turned. Amara stood in the doorway of the hotel under the golden awning, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold, her black dress catching the light. She held 1,001 between 2 fingers, folded neatly. He waited. She walked to him. She did not stop until she was close enough that he could smell her. A warm, faintly citrus note over cedar, nothing expensive, nothing performed. She reached forward. She slid the folded bill into the small breast pocket of his coat and pressed it flat with the pad of her thumb. "Sir," she said quietly in Korean, "I think you need this more than I do. Anyone rich enough to spend 3 million won on dinner, but poor enough to leave 1,000 as a tip is suffering from something money cannot fix. I hope, when you decide what that thing is, you also decide to be kind about it." She smiled. It was a small, careful smile. Then she bowed the exact 8 degrees. She turned. She walked back into the hotel. She did not know that Sang-woo's right hand had, at the instant she reached forward, moved to the small holster inside his coat, and that a single micro-shake of the head from Min-jun had stopped him. She did not know that she had been 3 seconds from a different ending to her life. She only knew that her feet were cold and her rent was due, and the bus stopped running at 11:15. Kang Min-jun stood in the rain. Sang-woo did not speak. Sang-woo had served the Kang family for 19 years. He knew when not to speak. Min-jun lifted his hand slowly and touched the small folded bill in his breast pocket. He kept his fingers there for a long moment. Then he got into the car. "Home," he said. Sang-woo drove. Min-jun did not sleep that night. He sat at the low black glass table in his penthouse on the 42nd floor and looked for 4 uninterrupted hours at a single folded piece of paper. Something small and unwelcome was moving inside him. He did not have a word for it. He had spent 5 years hollowing out the language of feeling from his own vocabulary. It was, he thought, close to shame, but it was also close to hunger. As though he had, for the first time in half a decade, tasted a thing his body had forgotten how to want. By dawn, he had opened a private encrypted file on his laptop and begun what he had never done for any woman in his life. A quiet, careful, invisible inquiry. Her name, her address, her tax records, her phone, her banking, her family. By the following evening, 3 of the 4 best analysts inside the Kang Investment Group's internal intelligence unit had returned answers, and the answers had, without exception, refused to line up. Her name was Amara Johnson. She was 26. She was on a valid working visa, sponsored by a subsidiary of the Han Sky Tower. She earned 2,300,000 won a month. She sent on average 1,400,000 won of that back to a bank account in Cape Town belonging to a hospice specializing in pediatric oncology in the name of a girl named Naledi Johnson, aged 11, undergoing treatment for leukemia. She rented a single room in Yeonam-dong. She had no known romantic partners. She had no known Korean family. She had no known criminal record. She also, according to a search his analysts had run twice because they did not believe the first result, appeared in a 2011 photograph published in the Financial Times, standing in a Cape Town garden between two smiling adults at the age of 13, at the memorial reception for her parents Solomon and Nomvula Johnson, the founders of the Johnson Adebayo Philanthropic Trust, a foundation controlling, at the time of their deaths, 3.1 billion American dollars in international mining, health, and education assets. Min Jun read the report twice. He did not sleep the second night either. He returned to Sebuke on the third night. He returned on the fourth. By the end of the second week, he had come to the restaurant 9 times, always in a different disguise, always in the same corner seat, always served by request by Amara. He no longer played the game. He did not spill the wine. He did not complain about the beef. He did not order dessert from Paris. He talked. Not much at first, but he asked her questions, and he listened to her answers, and he found, night after night, that a woman who had refused to break under humiliation could also refuse to flatter under attention. She did not flirt, she did not linger, but sometimes in a quiet moment between courses, she would say something small and sharp, an observation about the businessman 2 tables over, a joke in the Seoul dialect, a memory of a Cape Town winter. And he would find himself smiling. A small movement of his mouth, a muscle he had until then forgotten was still working. On the 11th visit, she leaned close to refill his water and said quietly, "Sir, may I ask what you actually do?" "I invest," he said. "In difficult industries. Are you good at it?" "I am the best in this city." "Ah," she poured. "Then perhaps you should invest in something a little less profitable and a little more useful. It might help with the thing that made you leave that dollar." She did not know she had said the exact sentence that would, 47 days later, cause a man to change the direction of an entire criminal empire. On the 17th night, at a charity gala inside the Hanskai Tower's grand ballroom on the 49th floor, the world he had built with such patience nearly ended in a single second. He was there because his mother, Madame Kang Hye Jin, had insisted. He was there because the Kang family owned 12% of the beneficiary foundation. He was there because Amara Johnson was working the gala. He had, without telling her, without telling anyone, had her assigned as one of the floor waitstaff for the evening. He was standing near the west windows with a glass of untouched champagne when the first shot came. The window behind him spider-webbed but did not shatter. Bulletproof glass. Someone had not known. The second shot came through the same hole. He would remember afterward that Amara was 3 meters away with a tray of flutes and that she moved before the second shot registered. She did not shout. She did not freeze. She dropped the tray, ran 3 steps, and put her whole body between him and the window. The bullet took her in the left shoulder. It exited high, cleanly. He caught her as she fell. The ballroom did not go silent immediately. Ballrooms of that altitude never did. There was, first, the collective inhalation, then the shrieks, then the sudden roar of 600 people trying to move in 600 directions at once. Sang-woo was already there. 2 of Min Jun's other men, Baek Do-ha and Yoon Sung-il, were vaulting tables. A private security detail from the foundation was crumbling in confusion. Min Jun was on his knees on the marble. He was holding a young black woman in a black cocktail dress against his chest. Her blood was soaking through his white shirt. Her eyes were still open. Her breath was even. She looked up at him and said quietly, in English, "Your left inside pocket." He blinked at her. "Your left inside pocket," she said. Her voice was thin. "Compression. Fold it. Press." He understood after a half-second that she was telling him how to save her life. He reached into his own jacket. He tore his silk pocket square out. He folded it against the wound. He pressed with the flat of his hand. The ballroom was already emptying. Baek Do-ha was speaking into his cuff. Yoon Sung-il was moving guests out. 2 men had begun to walk toward Min Jun with an expression he recognized. His own security team, closing rank, no longer pretending. Baek Do-ha reached him first. Beck Doha lowered himself to one knee, the small, formal genuflection of the Kang Syndicate's second-tier officers to the chairman. "Chairman," he said, "we have to move." The room, which had been on the edge of chaos, absorbed the word. "Chairman." An older woman with a diamond brooch gasped audibly. A politician near the door turned white. The maitre d' of the gala, who had until that moment believed he was serving an anonymous investor named Park Do-hyun, took one full step backward. Amara looked up at Min Jun. "Chairman," she repeated. Her voice was thin. "Later," he said. "Now," she whispered. "Chairman of what?" He did not answer her. He picked her up. He carried her through the ballroom. He did not run. He walked because the chairman of the Kang Investment Group did not run in front of 600 people, even when the woman he had almost killed by proxy was bleeding into his shirt. He walked her to the private elevator. He walked her into the waiting car. He drove her to a private hospital in Samsung-dong that his family had funded quietly for 11 years. She survived. She had lost less than half a liter of blood. The bullet had not fractured the scapula. She would, the surgeon said, be back on her feet in 4 weeks if she was patient. She was not patient. She woke at 9 the next morning. She looked around the private suite. She looked at the man asleep in the chair beside the bed, still in his blood-crusted shirt, still holding her small brass locket in one hand, the locket he had gently unfastened from her neck the night before to keep it from being cut off by paramedics. She looked at him for a long time. She said quietly, "Chairman Kang." He opened his eyes. "You are awake," he said. "I am. You should not be. I am not good at doing what I should. I imagine you can relate." He looked at her. "Amara." "Chairman. I owe you my life. You do not. I do. You do not because I did not do it for you. I did it because in Cape Town, when I was 9, my father pushed my mother out of the way of a car and took the impact himself, and he died, and I promised myself I would never stand still while another person's body took a hit meant for me. I would have done it for anyone. Do not romanticize it." He absorbed the sentence. He absorbed the fact that she had, on the marble floor of a ballroom, been the first person to teach his own hands how to press a wound. "There are things I have to tell you," he said quietly, "things about who I am. Chairman of the Kang Investment Group, which is, if the whispers are accurate, the polite name for the Kang Syndicate, which is, if the whispers are more accurate, one of the largest underground financial organizations in East Asia. I heard the word your bodyguard used last night. I am a Waitress, Chairman. I am not deaf. There are also things I've learned about you." She went still. "Ah," she said. He rose. He walked to the window. He kept his back to her, because it was the only respectful way to say what came next. "I know about your parents. I know about Naledi. I know about the trust in the Cayman Islands. I know about the anonymous scholarships in Nairobi and Lagos and Kigali. I know that you have not touched the principal of your inheritance in 6 years. I know the address of the small room you rent in Yeonam-dong. I know that your landlord has been trying to raise your rent for 8 months and that his son has been reassigned to a different job in a different city as of yesterday because his family owed a debt to a company I own, and I have called it in." He turned. He looked at her. "I am sorry. I did not know how to stop looking once I had started. I hope, when you are stronger, you will forgive me for that." She did not answer immediately. Then she said softly, "Chairman." "Yes." The name Park Do-hyun was one of my aliases. Do-hyun was your brother's name. He went very still. "Yes. I read about him 5 years ago. Small item in the international pages. I remember because the family in Cape Town who had raised me after my parents' deaths lost a son in the same month. I have thought about that boy for 5 years, Chairman. Not the way you did, but I thought about him." He did not speak. "You have been walking around this world," she said, "with a dead brother in your mouth. You have been leaving $1 tips in strangers' pockets because you needed the world to fail you, over and over, because if the world kept failing you, then you never had to admit that the person who really failed him was you." He did not turn away. "I did fail him," he said. "You did not pull the trigger. I trusted the woman who told the men where he would be. Then you failed at judgment. You did not fail at love. Do not blur them, Chairman. The room was very quiet for a long time. At last he said, Miss Johnson. Yes. Would you allow me to buy you dinner in a small restaurant, where I am not the chairman, where you are not a waitress, where we simply sit? Chairman. Yes. That will never be possible. You will always be the chairman. I will always be the woman who watched a birthday cake fall on a carpet and cared. What I would allow one day, when I am well, is for us to sit as those people, as the ones we actually are, not as the ones we are pretending not to be. He inclined his head. He inclined it in the small, formal bow he had not given anyone in 5 years. The next 6 weeks moved like a tide. Amara healed. Min June, without asking permission, quietly arranged for Naledi Johnson, aged 11, to be flown to Seoul for a second opinion at the country's finest pediatric oncology center. The second opinion led to a third. The third led to a clinical trial. Naledi Johnson would live to be 41 and would, in her 30s, publish 2 books. Amara returned to work at Sabyuk. She refused to accept a promotion. She insisted on continuing her shift. The staff, who now understood exactly who her regular had been, did not know what to do with her calm, so they matched it. Min June returned to the restaurant 3 nights a week. He did not eat much. He watched her work. He listened on quiet evenings to the way she taught the new waitresses how to bow at the exact 8 degrees. They discovered, over careful conversations in the small, unmarked office he kept on the 12th floor of the tower, that their enemies had, for a very long time, been the same enemies. The men behind the sniper at the gala, the men behind the sale of information that had killed Do Hyun, the men behind the car in Cape Town that had killed her parents. They followed the money. They followed the shell companies. They followed the names. At the center of every trail was a single name: Kim Chang-woo, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, a man photographed with 3 sitting presidents in the last 12 months, a man who ran a foundation whose humanitarian grants were, on close inspection, laundered payments to a network moving something far darker than money. They spent 6 weeks preparing. Amara ran the financial forensics from the small apartment in Yeonam-dong, which she refused to leave. Min June ran the internal cleansing of his own syndicate, the removal of the 11 men who had, over 5 years, quietly served 2 masters. On the 43rd day, in the sub-basement of an unfinished skyscraper in Songdo, Kang Min June found his brother. Kang Do-hyun was alive. He had been alive for 5 years. He had been told from the 2nd month of his recovery that his older brother had ordered the hit that had put a bullet under his collarbone. He had been shown falsified transcripts. He had been shown fabricated intercepts. He had been shown, cruelly and repeatedly, a woman named Yoon Se-ra weeping into a camera about the guilt of loving a man capable of ordering his own brother's death. He had believed it because he had been 23 years old and shot and alone. He had become, over 5 years, exactly the weapon Kim Chang-woo had needed. Min June did not raise a weapon in the sub-basement. He walked into the room, unarmed, alone, in a plain black shirt. He knelt. He did not speak first. He waited. Kang Do-hyun, 28 now, gaunt, hollow around the eyes, held a pistol in a hand that did not shake but was not precisely steady. Then the door behind Min June opened and Amara stepped in. Do-hyun looked at her. She said, in Korean, quietly, "Kang Do-hyun si, your brother did not order the shot that took you. My father did not order the accident that took his wife. My mother did not choose to die in front of me. Your fiancé did not weep for your death, Do-hyun si. She was paid 3 billion won in a single wire transfer 48 hours before your shooting, from a shell company registered in Vaduz, and she is currently living under a different name in Zurich with a 2-year-old son that a DNA test I ran 3 days ago proved was Kim Chang-woo's. Everything you have been told for 5 years is a lie assembled by one man. I have brought you the evidence." She set a small silver drive on the concrete floor between them. "You do not have to believe me," she said, "but you have to look." Do-hyun looked at the drive. He looked at his brother. He lowered the pistol. Kim Chang-woo was arrested 6 days later at Incheon Airport, disembarking from a private flight from Geneva. The arrest was made not by Korean police, but by an international task force whose formation Amara had, unbeknownst to Min Jun, requested 3 years earlier during her long, quiet search for the truth about her parents. She had, it turned out, been building the case for a very long time. The $1 tip had accelerated it. It had not begun it. The empire Kim Chang-woo had spent 30 years building collapsed inside a week. The trafficking network he had funded through his foundation was dismantled in 11 countries. The two Kang brothers stood on the day of the collapse on the top floor balcony of the Hansky Tower and watched a small red-eye flight pull away from Incheon toward The Hague. Min Jun looked at Do-hyun. Do-hyun looked at his older brother. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Do-hyun said, "Hyung." "Yes. I am sorry. You were shot." "I am sorry anyway." "I know. I am sorry too." Do-hyun looked out over the city. "She is remarkable, Hyung, the waitress." "She is not a waitress." "She is. Whatever else she is that too. That is not a small thing." "No," Min Jun said, "it is not." 1 year later, at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, Kang Min Jun walked into Se-byuk alone. The staff had been told to leave the floor. The maitre d' bowed and quietly retreated. The room was empty except for one small round table in the center, laid with a white linen cloth and a single candle. Amara Johnson walked out of the service corridor in her fitted black dress and low black pumps, and her lipstick the exact plum shade her mother had once worn to Sunday services. She stopped 1 meter from him. "Sir," she said, "Miss Johnson, you reserved the entire restaurant." "I did." "That is excessive." "It is." "Why?" He held out a small, unwrapped wooden box. It was the size of a paperback. It was carved from the wood of a jacaranda tree that had, at his private request, been sent from a garden in Cape Town, where a girl of 9 had once been raised by an aunt who now lived in the same wing of his own mother's compound. Amara opened it. Inside, on a folded piece of cream paper, lay a single 1001 note, the old kind, slightly creased. Beside it, a handwritten letter, only 3 lines. "That night, you gave me back a coin I had thrown away. I did not know then that the coin was the man I was supposed to become. Marry me, Amara Johnson. Not because I need to be saved, because I want to spend the rest of my life earning the version of myself you saw first." She looked up. He was already on one knee. She did not weep. Amara Johnson had not wept in front of anyone since she was 13, and she was not going to begin in front of the man kneeling in front of her. She simply reached forward, took the folded note out of the box, and slid it carefully into the small breast pocket of his coat. She pressed it flat with the pad of her thumb. "Sir," she said quietly, "I think you need this more than I do." His mouth did not move for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a real laugh, and it came from somewhere in his chest that had, 5 years earlier, been sealed shut with grief and had, over the last 12 months, been quietly, painstakingly reopened. "Amara? Yes. Is that a yes?" "That is a ask me again while standing up like a person, Kang Min Jun. I am not going to marry a man who kneels. I am going to marry a man who stands." He stood. He asked again. She said yes. Outside, the rain fell on Cheongdam-dong. Sang-woo waited by the Maybach with one hand on the door. The city breathed cedar smoke and wet asphalt and the low rooftop bass. Inside the empty restaurant, in the exact seat where Kang Min Jun had once left a $1 tip on a $3,000 meal, the most feared man in Seoul held the hand of a curvy black waitress from Cape Town, who was, and had always been, the wealthiest woman in the room. What no one in that restaurant knew, on that quiet night, was that Yoon Se-ra had 4 days earlier boarded a private jet from Zurich under a third alias, and that her destination was Seoul. Do you think Kang Min Jun and Amara Johnson can survive what the woman who once sold his brother is about to bring back into their lives? Or will the past finally do what a sniper's bullet could not? Drop your theory in the comments. Tell me your favorite moment from tonight. The $1 walk into the rain, the ballroom shot, the sub-basement, or the last kneel. And if this story hit you where you live, smash that like button. Share it with the friend who lives for stories about the quiet ones the world overlooks, and subscribe because their story is not over. It is only just beginning to burn.